Hi everyone, today we'll be talking about how can we preserve bee products for apitherapy. Yes, because if we want to use those bee products for apitherapy, for health, well, we need really high quality product, and there are ways to preserve them that will make sure that we keep all the good properties of bee products and that will make our apitherapy way more efficient. So let's go through the four main bee products and see how we can preserve them, what is optimal. Let's start with honey right away. So honey, it contains mainly sugars, and there's many different sugars. It's way more complex than just sucrose, like white sugar, for example. So it's way better than this sugar-wise. And now, if we look at the other components, there are polyphenols in honey. Anytime you got polyphenols, you have to preserve your product from light. So of course, light is a way to oxidize a product. So we have to preserve honey from light. And now this is kind of counterintuitive because very often you see honey on the shelf in a transparent jar, in a glass jar that is, it's not amber, it's no blue, it's just a transparent glass. So you see this all the time in pretty much all the stores. Even beekeepers sell their honey this way. That's the main way to sell honey right now. Well, when that is happening, you can be sure that many polyphenols in your honey will be gone just because of the light activity on your honey. So if you're looking for honey and you don't know a beekeeper that harvests it and you go right away, you collect it yourself and then you preserve it from light, you have a couple options. Well, of course, if you buy it in pails, very often they're white plastic, so they will protect from light. That's one option. Another option is to look for honey that have a really big label that covers pretty much all the glass. So this way, it's preserved from light, it's protected from the light, at least partly. And of course, underneath the jar, there's almost never a label there. So of course, the light will go through there, but it will be more protected. So that's one option. And now another component in honey will be all the enzymes and the probiotic and prebiotic in honey. There are some. It's not super rich, but there are some. So if you want to preserve that, don't heat your honey. So any honey that is pasteurized, forget about it. This is no good, not needed in honey at all. So you shouldn't do this. Actually, when beekeepers or actually like manufacturers heat the honey, it's just to make it liquid so they can pump it in the jars very easily. So if you can, choose raw honey that hasn't been heated at all, nor filtered. So this way you have all those good enzymes and prebiotic components of honey. So that's another good thing to look for. And when you preserve your honey, same thing. If at any point there will be crystallization of your honey or separation of your honey, that happens sometimes. Actually, this is not bad honey. It's not fake honey because it separates or it crystallizes. All honey will eventually crystallize or separate. So this is kind of normal. If that happened and you want to heat your honey to make it liquid again, you can, but do it very gently. Maximum, don't heat it too much. It's usually, we say 39 centigrades maximum. So you have to do that very gently. Don't heat your honey. Otherwise, you'll destroy those benefits for your intestinal flora. So of course, there are more things about honey. For example, that in many countries, they say, don't give honey to infants under 2 years old or sometimes 1 year old, depending where you are. So that, yes, it's possible that there's that bacteria in honey that is named Clostridium botulinum. So yeah, there's a potential. Why is that potential there and it's not somewhere else? Actually, there's also a potential for that bacteria to be on a carrot, for example, because that bacteria is actually in the soil. So anything that you have that comes from the soil could have that bacteria in it. Actually, honey is antibacterial. So the bacteria will not multiply in honey. It won't be like, a chance for honey to create a huge amount of that bacteria, not at all. But there could still be some presence of that bacteria that survive there, but it's not necessarily more than on, as I said, any vegetable that comes from the earth. It's kind of similar, the potential. There are some cases known that infants did die from botulism, and it's been proven, I heard in at least one case, but it's really rare. Like, this is worldwide, this is crazy. It's very, very rare, but at least there's one case that's been proven it's coming from honey. So yes, there's a chance that it's there. This is really rare. I'm not telling you to do it because, of course, it's everybody says not to do it, and this is a legal thing. So don't hear me thinking that I'm saying that infants can eat honey. I'm just trying to describe, is it a preservation issue? Where is that bacteria coming from? I'm just trying to explain it. So since it's coming from the ground, sometimes some beekeepers, if they are, they don't work that nicely, some will actually put some frames directly on the ground, on the soil. So through the soil there, that bacteria could climb up the frame, basically because some dirt could actually stick to the frame. And if there's some of that bacteria there, of course, it's possible that bacteria will eventually find itself in honey. So that's one thing. If you have like beekeepers that don't do such a clean job as they work with the bees, that's one thing. Another option could be the bees themselves. The bees, maybe you don't know, but they do drink. So bees drink. So they go get their water, and they choose their water in a very special way because they need a rich intestinal flora for themselves. So they will actually choose water that has a lot of microorganisms in it. So they'll find water very often where there's some wood that is rotting slowly and there's lots of microorganisms that they love in it. And so they'll go in places and sometimes directly on the ground, on the soil itself, to get their water. So yes, there could be that bacteria there on the soil, and they could actually have it on themselves and bring it back to the beehive. It is possible. So yes, bees are very clean, and they go on very nice places, flowers mainly, but sometimes they could go actually on the soil to just for mainly to get water. So that's another option. So yes, there's a slight chance that bacteria could be in honey. So that's the explanation. It's not so much about preservation issue. There might be other possibilities, but these are the main ones. So yeah, that covers pretty much the topic of honey. Again, this is not an exhaustive thing. There might be other important things to mention about honey. If you think about them, of course, mention them in the comments, and that will add up to everything. So let's move to the next bee product, pollen. Now, pollen is mainly has a high nutritional value. So we want to preserve all the nutritional aspect of pollen. There's also polyphenols. So we have to protect from light right away because we don't want oxidation. And that would also preserve actually the nutritional aspect of the pollen. So preserve it from light, and also fresh frozen. Please, it's so much better fresh frozen than dehydrated. Once it's dehydrated, the pollen, and even very often you find your pollen, it's on a shelf, it's in a glass jar that is not tainted. It's just so there's light hitting it all the time. Dehydrated pollen will last for a really long time, so you might find some really old dehydrated pollen there. And so light made its job. It killed a lot, it destroyed a lot of those polyphenols and so on, and created a lot of oxidation. Will actually decrease the value, even the nutritional value of your pollen, because once the polyphenols are destroyed, then it will hit the protein, the lipids, and so on. So so the best way is fresh frozen. If you have a chance to have it protected from light, that's a bonus. But please, fresh frozen, when you dehydrate your pollen, you're killing everything that is there as a probiotic and prebiotic for your intestinal flora. There's some that is left, but it's very small compared to the really high concentration of those that exist in fresh frozen bee pollen. You also lose a lot of vitamins when you dehydrate your pollen. So fresh frozen, if possible, protected from light, and of course as fresh as possible, as new as possible. So these are the ways to preserve your pollen. If you're a beekeeper and you're harvesting your pollen, to preserve it, harvest it really often. Every 24 hours or so is best. If you cannot, 48 hours, I wouldn't go more than this. That's maximum. And then you freeze it right away. So harvest it, freeze it right away. Don't leave it. Very often when we harvest pollen, it's hot outside. Don't leave it there at hot temperature. Be quick, hurry and freeze it right away. You'll see the difference in your product. It will be much, much, much better. And you'll taste it, but mainly you'll feel it because the benefits you'll get from it will be much higher. So that's how to preserve pollen. Now, let's move to Propolis. Propolis is a bee product that is really high in polyphenols. That one is not nutritional at all compared to the two previous ones. This one is only for health, I would say, for your immune system. So you're looking at preserving your polyphenols. So of course, main thing, preserve it from light. And another thing is don't heat it either. If you heat it, because beekeepers very often, they want to clean their propolis. They want to separate the wax from the resin itself. And propolis is actually a mixture of wax and resin. So very often there's a lot of wax in there. They want to get rid of some. So there's many ways to deal with this. One of those is you just make it in small pieces, break it in small pieces, and then you put in water. The wax will be floating on top. You remove the wax, then the resin is at the bottom in the water. You take your resin and then you let it dry. If you let it dry under the sun, which I've seen happening a few times, then of course it's in direct sunlight. Lots of polyphenols will go in the air. Not only through light, but also propolis has a lot of volatile particles and that are active and good. So actually the videos I made on the Propolis, propolis devices that heat up the propolis and that actually clean your air and so on, they work exactly on this with those volatile active particles of propolis. So you have to make sure those particles, you don't lose them. If you let your resin dry outside under the sunshine, maybe you can think, it's just a couple, I don't know, an hour or so, or a couple hours, or just 30 minutes or so. Well, this is already a lot because the sunshine will do a few things. The light will oxidize your product, and also the volatile particles will also go in the air. The water will go away for sure, that's good, but you lose also some of those volatile particles. So that's not the best way. Another way is very often found in mass productions. This is a common thing. They will actually heat it up, and then the wax, of course, will separate from the resin. And if you do this, same thing, that will also deteriorate a lot of your polyphenols, and this is no good, not the best way either. So just be careful about how you clean your propolis. This is very important to look for, and once it's ready to be preserved, just make sure it's in something that is closed, so your active particles won't flow away in the air, evaporates in the air away from your product. And also keep it frozen, so those those volatile particles will also be more stable and will stay in your product if it's frozen. So that's a good thing. And of course, keep it away from light. And when you buy it, either in tincture or capsules or any form of propolis, make sure you buy it in a bottle that is protected from light. That is common sense. It should be always done this way. I've never seen it other ways, but make sure it's in that protected this way, either through tinted glass or plastic bottle don't let the light go through. So that's for propolis. Now let's move on to royal jelly. Royal jelly, there's three ways that you can find it: either fresh frozen or lyophilized, or fresh refrigerated. Now, royal jelly is different than pollen or propolis. You cannot freeze it because its water content is so high. If you freeze it, it will actually deteriorate its ingredients. So you should not freeze royal jelly, actually. The best way is fresh refrigerated, and it has to be real fresh. Usually it will stay good for about a year when it's fresh refrigerated, maybe up to a year and a half depending, but that depends on, you know, the production. Is it really fresh from that moment? So about a year and a half. And yeah, fresh frozen is best because you don't change anything in your product. It will remain good. That's very well preserved. Lyophilized is not bad either. If it's like frozen lyophilization, will actually keep most active ingredients in the royal jelly. So you get rid of the water, so it's easier to preserve than your royal jelly. It can be put in capsules, for example. And so this is not bad if it's well done, but it needs to be a real royal jelly, which is not that often the case. Watch it. And the other thing is it has to be done when it's fresh and fresh refrigerated. And then you lyophilized it. So of course it will be frozen through the process, but the ingredients actually from the studies that have been done remain pretty much the same. Of course, the best will always remain the fresh refrigerated. So thank you very much. That was a brief review of the preservation process for all bee products. If you have more comments, you do things different, you have your own way to do it and you think it's the best, well, you're welcome to write it down in the comments section. And thank you very much for watching and listening, and see you another time for another Apitherapy video.